almost always forget. All right, friends in Cincinnati, thank you for joining us for our second to last panel discussion with Cincinnati City Council candidates. It's just mind-boggling to me that we are almost done. It's just crazy, and these discussions have been really fun. I'm going to miss them. And, regardless of the results of the election, I may, continue to do these with other candidates and all that good stuff, because they're just a lot of fun. And I know, Douglas, this breaks your heart that these are coming to an end, because you've been to literally every single one. As always, we'll lay out the ground rules. These are meant to be informative discussions and outlets for individuals to just share their ideas and answer questions naturally and with their own integrity. These are not meant to be debates. So while disagreements may happen, my personal philosophy is I don't think people learn much from arguments and back and forth. So I try to, refrain from that as much as possible and ask participants and whether panelists, so candidates, or people in the chat or the Q&A to do the same. Also, the golden rule, respect is number one here, because we're all just trying to make our city better. And I think that we can all work towards that goal in a way that is respectful and honorable. So tonight, I'm really excited to be joined once again by Councilman Gooden, as well as Rob Harris. Thank you, gentlemen, both for joining. We'll start off the night by just talking a little bit about our respective campaigns. And how we'll do it tonight is, I'll give you each a couple minutes to just explain who you are and what you're really envisioning as far as your hopes and plans for the city, if elected. And for kind of the icebreaker question, I would love to hear your perspective on what has been surprising about campaigning so far, maybe both in the positive and the negative sense. What has really surprised you, whether for better or worse? So I will start with the candidate that I actually know the least, because I'm really excited to hear more about your platform. Rob Harris, please introduce yourself and share more about your platform.
Good evening. Thank you, Stacy. Hello, Steve. I'm thankful for the opportunity in this platform to just speak and give a little bit more information about myself. Born and raised in the heart of the city and in the West End community, where I learned a lot about just the city in itself, from growing up in a single parent household, from going to Cincinnati Public Schools, Cincinnati Withrow, and then going on to a small liberal college, Wittenberg University, where I studied sociology and business management. Professionally, I have a business retail banking background, so on the financial end, where I learned a lot about budgeting, but heavily in a community, which has always been my passion, to work with our youth and give back and serve as an example. So I do a lot of mentorships. I serve as president of the West End Little Senators Football Chair Youth, which is near and dear. There's over maybe 160 kids and parents that's involved in this organization that I have an opportunity to not only apply a skill service to them, but listen to their views and help them on and off the field. I'm fortunate in that aspect. And I also, in addition to that, sit on the board of the Carl Linder YMCA, where I have an opportunity to provide those resources and give back. And then my church home, I St. Joseph Catholic Church, been a kind of life memory there, where I went on and served as a youth coordinator, and then I'm involved in the Knights of Peter Claver Lady Auxiliary, which is a Catholic fraternal organization, where I learned a lot about parliamentary and Robert's rules in terms of meetings and structures, one of the same things that they carry on in city council. In addition to being a advisor of a go to high school, go to college program with my fraternal, which we use some of those procedures too. But however, tonight I'm here because I'm passionate about the city of Cincinnati. So we all want safe and clean and livable, a livable city to live in. My key, my key concerns is one is affordable housing. Two is curbing the gun violence and the homicide that's been going on in our city, as we all are aware of. Um, the, the numbers are outrageous in terms of an all-time high, over 490 shootings and 90 plus homicide and counting. Those things are continuing on, in addition to some of the integrity that's been going on in the past. So the things that I stand for has been the things that I've been doing, and I just want to carry that on to maybe have a seat at the table and push the concerns that I personally do on a day-to-day basis, be a voice of the people, and then also listen and add to the leadership that's at hand.
My unmute button was hiding behind the Q&A, so I couldn't find it for a moment there. So far in campaigning, what has kind of been the biggest opportunity for learning for you, or what has been the most surprising to you, Mr. Harris?
One approach is just I go about business as usual, but what I do know is that it's a lot of eyes, a lot more eyes that's paying close attention to the things that I do, and the things that I want to improve on is just surveys and listening to the city and the residents and the people of the city, because that's where true change comes from. You know, on several Zoom calls and listening to community councils, that's very important. So you see the needs and you hear the needs there without saying a word, taking notes, listening, and then putting those thoughts and those surveys and those concerns, the things that's going on in our everyday lives, and then looking at the city and seeing how we can better change that in each category. So there are several categories that we can improve on this city. Each community is different. Each community have their own concerns, and how can we address those as a whole? But there are several in the priority opportunity that's high priority in our city right now. And when you look at the crime and the homicides, of course, anybody that's passing, and when you lose a person, or someone gets murdered, that's no comparison to anything else, in my opinion. And not only does it affect that family, it's affecting our city. So those are our concerns. Police and community engagements are always needed in terms of what we can do and how we can improve on those. And overall, listening and having an ear and being ready and being prepared to execute.
I don't know why I keep forgetting to unmute myself. It's not like I haven't been doing telehealth for the last year plus. But I appreciate your thoughts, Rob. Thank you for sharing. Councilman Gooden, can I pass the baton to you, sir? We'd love to hear more about you, your hopes and plans for the city, and what has been surprising or of interest to you while you've been campaigning.
Well, Stacey, thank you for putting these together. These have been great fun, and I've had a lot of folks reach out to me based on my in the previous one. So, I mean, people really are watching these and checking in over time. So it's fantastic. And hello, Mr. Walton. I see your note. And, Mr. Walton has two of my shirts that almost never see any daylight anymore. And he and I will work that out. I was available for a workout last Thursday, Mr. Walton, which was my bench press day. And you were not feeling well, and we'll let that slide. But we'll try to get together here in the future. I will be benching again this Friday on my schedule, Mr. Walton. And Mr. Harris, good to you. I've heard some good things about you on the campaign trail, so it's very nice hearing your perspective here. I'll be very brief. I've been on council since Walton's benching tomorrow. Okay, well, maybe we'll see if we make that work, Doug. Let me look at my schedule. Mr. Harris, if you haven't gotten a campaign shirt over to Mr. Walton, you should. It's a good luck charm. I'm convinced that everybody who has a a campaign shirt to Doug Walton had a shot of a top 9 finish. He's a good luck charm. It's hard to. Real quickly, I've been on council since November of last year. And it's been a great experience for me. I am sort of a budget nerd, and I really kind of involved myself in a lot of the budget process. We've been working very hard on getting together a package of ethics reforms that I think will see the light of day here in the month of September, that we all feel very good about. Including something that I've been championing for a long time, which is a complete and total ban on developer contributions. They have things that are pending before the city, whether it be a financial incentive package, whether it be a zoning change. I mean, these things could be worth tens of millions of dollars. And the idea that people can be the mayor or candidates or city council members can solicit people from, while they have these sort of pending contribution or pending pieces of business for the city with all this money, that is insane to me. And a lot of cities have banned it, and that's where sort of the root of the problem is, in my view. So I'm very happy that it looks like we're going to see some action on that yet this year. And whether I'm on council or not in the future, I feel that's something I say, look, I was a part of that. I drove that piece, and that's something I can feel good about. So, I mean, really, my focus is, Mr. Harris, very similar to yours, which is and again, I we can hear my dog in the background. I put him out, but he's barking so loud you can sort of hear him still.
That's okay. These are to happen in real life. So I always say that I will probably get interrupted by a cat, although that has not happened yet. I promise I do have cats and they do interrupt me. So it's all good. Just out of curiosity, what is the dog's name?
His name is Leo, and he's an 80+ pound German Shepherd.
Woo.
And I put him outside, and he has now come to the window behind me and is barking through the window. So you can kind of hear that. I'm sorry. There's
all
not
good.
Much else I can do at this point.
All good.
So I'll talk quickly and loudly. No, really, when we get outside of the ethics issue, which I think is a huge issue right now in the city. I mean, when I'm canvassing, the ethics over and over and over, but the issues are really gun violence and just basic emphasis. Why we aren't doing more for our neighborhoods and our communities. I mean, we've done a phenomenal job downtown and over the Rhine and in parts of the West End, frankly, in terms of revitalizing and putting money in and building the infrastructure and fixing the streets and attracting exciting new restaurants and things of that nature. But the other neighbors in the city have not seen that kind of growth. And that's where our people live. And we're seeing a lot of interest. A lot of millennials are wanting to move into the neighborhoods right now. The business districts are sort of organically grown, but they need help and they need support. And sort of focus, as a council member, has been and will be if I'm reelected, is in trying to steer as much energy as we can back out to those into the neighborhoods. I'm a big believer in the broken windows theory of law enforcement, which is, fix the broken windows. And if it looks like people are living in these neighborhoods, treat them, all neighborhoods with respect, and enforce our building codes and deal with the vacant properties, that's going to lift up the neighborhood in a way that even increased law enforcement cannot. So I believe in all those things. The biggest surprise for me, frankly, on the campaign trail has been how uniform these concerns are. I mean, if you Hyde Park, you go to Oakland, you go to Westwood, you go to East Westwood, you go to Avondale, we're hearing the same things, which is we want police officers walking the streets. We don't want police officers sitting in their cars. We want them walking their beats. We want the building codes enforced fairly so that the abandoned properties are cleaned up. We want our streets repaired. We want some flower boxes. We want murals. We want the same respect and the same kind of thoughtful sort of approach that's happening over the Rhine. We want that in all our neighborhoods. Now, I was just at the opening. I don't know if you guys have been to Imag Alley here off Vine Street. I was just at the grand opening of Imagination Alley, which is an incredibly thoughtful public art space right in the heart of Over the Rhine that includes a lot of input from the neighborhoods. And I challenge the folks to put it together. Beautiful, this is wonderful. Why isn't this in East Westwood too? Why is this on Rockdale as well? Why aren't we in the city? I mean, this is, the folks from Westchester who come down and hang out on the weekend, they see this and they're like, wow, this is pretty thoughtful and nice and neat. But why aren't we doing this elsewhere? And to me, that's the question that'll be before the next council, which is how do we take some of these very thoughtful, these thoughtful projects that we've done downtown, and how do we get that energy out into the other, 51 neighborhoods. So, but those are my thoughts, and I'm here on the campaign trail.
Very good. I appreciate you sharing. Steve, I'm having you're cutting in and out. You may want to try resetting your internet and all that good stuff. It may just be on my end. I'm not positive, but I want to make sure that everyone can hear you loud and clear as much as possible. As far as I go, I'll take this time to introduce myself as well. My name is Stacy Smith, and I am from West Price Hill. And why I got into the race is, for a lot of the same reasons that these gentlemen have mentioned as well. However, I think when it comes to a functioning city council, you should have a lot of different experiences and levels of expertise coming to play, and all bringing these things to the, how am I trying to word this? Everyone bringing a different puzzle piece to the table to make our city more complete and to make our city function better. And, I hear many candidates really focusing on things like trying to reduce crime, beautifying our neighborhoods, making sure that our roads are paved and, trash is picked up, improving relations between police and citizens, all of those things, affordable housing. I hear many, many candidates focusing on those things. But one of the missing puzzle pieces that I think gets overlooked time and time again is people's mental health care. And this is something that cities, I think, across the nation should absolutely step up and take more of a progressive approach to addressing these concerns. And, cities absolutely can. Mental health treatment and mental health care is not something that, needs to be kept in the shadows anymore. This isn't some taboo, unreachable thing that only, the people who are locked up in the mental hospitals need. This is something that everyone needs. And I think that as leaders, we should be helping facilitate that. Now, I am a licensed therapist. I've been licensed in the state of Ohio since 2017. And so, I actually have the experience in the therapy world to back up some of my ideas. So for example, having mental health mobile crisis and assistance units, patrolling the city and working in the city so that instead of, Cincinnati Police Department responding to mental health calls 7,000 to 8,000 times per year, instead we could have licensed therapists, licensed social workers taking care of those calls. And I think now is the appropriate time because we have a new generation of therapists and social workers who don't just want to work in a traditional office setting. We want to be out doing these types of things. So, kind of strike while the iron is hot. Also to have a council member who is still cognizant of the fact that we are very much still in the throes of an opioid epidemic. That seems to get, I think, lost when more interesting or hot button topics come up instead. But, we still have people suffering with addiction. We still have people dying from this and yet the resources and what we have put into it and the amount that our city kind of steps in to intervene, I think has dwindled some. Now, I won't say dropped off completely. I think we're still spending some of the funds that we received for the state of emergency that was declared. And I think that, there are still good efforts being made, but I think some of the support and the interest has dwindled. Meanwhile, the epidemic itself has continued to climb. And I really think we just need one individual to really have that be their main focus. And I'm willing to do that. I'm also, wanting to advocate for children. I work with children full time. But, it angers me, little things like the fact that our recreation centers, which many of our children rely on and real staples in our community, continue to get their funds cut when we really should be pouring. It shouldn't be, how much can we cut from our CRCs every year? It should be, okay, what can we add to our CRCs every year, in my opinion. Also making sure that all children have equal access to play. We don't have, to my knowledge, a fully 100% wheelchair accessible playground in the city of Cincinnati. And that drives me up a wall to just think about that. So those are some of my key issues, in addition to making sure that we really tackle the affordable housing deficit, making sure that we have, a transit system that works for our community and isn't just like hemorrhaging money, making sure that people can get around, whether that's by car, by bus, by streetcar, I suppose, because it's here, or if they want to be pedestrians, they should be able to do so safely. I say want to as if we all aren't pedestrians. But that shouldn't be as high of a risk as it is. And so those are among some of my other key issues. Some of the things that have surprised me while campaigning, one, in a good sense, is how genuinely fun it has been. I really appreciate the folks that I have gotten to meet and some of the events that we've been able to, go to and host, and just getting to knock on people's doors and have these conversations has been genuinely fun and just a really neat and encouraging experience. Something that has surprised me in the negative sense is it's been, really hard to drum up kind of tangible support, like having help, dropping literature and, knocking on doors and things like that. I think maybe I went into this thinking, and this is just to be completely vulnerable and honest, thinking like, yeah, folks are, I'm going to have like teams of people helping and things like that. It's going to be great. And that hasn't been the reality quite yet. I have definitely had assistance, and I don't want to make it sound like I haven't. I appreciate every person who has helped thus far. But, it's been work, getting people to jump on board and help. And that's been a neat, but I think important learning experience for me. So with that said, once again, I appreciate the two of you being here. So let's kind of jump into the conversation. For those who are watching, if you would like to ask questions, you can do so in the chat or using the Q&A. We'll start our conversation, but your questions are going to take priority if and as those come in. But tonight, I think, some of the things that are really on people's minds and hearts are the affordable housing concern, as well as transit and transportation. So I kind of wanted to open up the conversation a little bit, no pun intended whatsoever, but Councilman Gooden, I would like to kind of not throw you under the bus, put you under the spotlight. That's what I mean to say. One question that was asked to me, and one that I've had as well, is in regards to the very difficult situation between, CPS, SORTA, Metro. For anyone who is not familiar, just a brief overview, SORTA decided to cut the extra routes that Metro had, and those were utilized by many public schools, high school students. That's how they got to school. They contracted with Metro and SORTA. But those were abruptly cut, 2 or 3 weeks before school started, and there's kind of been this public uproar since then. My question to you, Steve, and this can kind of get the conversation going from there, is realistically speaking, is there anything that city council could have or can do to intervene? Or is that an unfair and unrealistic expectation that folks have?
No, it's a very fair question. And, I can tell you, we did have a hearing last week where we delved into these issues in a pretty tough way. And so folks were very upset with me. Now, I used to be a trustee for SWORD. I mean, I was on the board of directors and, SWORD, I was part of SWORD. And I really do think, there's a lot of fault, to be assessed here, but, I do think SWORD is primarily at fault. I mean, the story is very simple. And it is that a lot of their drivers during the COVID period, when the reduced rates, went off and found other jobs, and they found themselves in a position where they could not staff these large routes. And they were late in telling CPS that they couldn't staff the routes. And CPS, of course, had an employee apparently who allegedly, but he's been relieved of his duties, who sat on that information until about 2 or 3 weeks before school started. So they were really not in a position to make any other arrangements. So, I mean, it was, I'm a lawyer by training. I'm going to use a legal term. It was a total shit show for everybody involved. It was terrible. And it left a lot of parents in the lurch, and there was really no opportunity or ability to go out and find so it was a complete logistical failure. It was a professional failure, and there's plenty of blame to go around. What city council can do is act as sort of a to bring and to force folks into a situation where we can try to get a better solution. I've been very involved in that. I've been reaching out to school board members. I've been talking to multiple school board members. We've been also the members union and other folks to try to figure a way out of this. Unfortunately, it's probably not going to happen this year, calendar year, maybe later in the school year we fix it, but it's an unacceptable situation. We have some kids who are spending upwards of 2 to 3 hours a day on buses, multiple changes getting to and from school, and that's just not acceptable. I mean, that's too much time in transit. There's just no way that it doesn't impact their education. I will say more generally, under our current, scheme of government here in Cincinnati, the bus system is its own political subdivision, as is the school board, the CPS, Cincinnati Public Schools. In some cities, including places like Chicago, the school, the city council has dealt with this kind of dysfunction by asserting and essentially taking over the schools and taking over the bus line. I don't know that we're quite there yet, but that is something that we obviously should be open to and considering, because I mean, when folks come to us with these kinds of complaints, it's very frustrating that we can't just sit down and with the city manager and figure it out. And that's how it feels like it should be and reasonably should be. Another, a lot of development in it, and when companies are thinking about coming to Cincinnati, the two biggest issues that I hear about are the schools and the roads. They're saying, well, our employees may not want to utilize them. They would expect to use the public schools, and there's some great CBS public schools, and there's some CBS schools that are by a lot of standards lacking. And that's a concern that these folks have, and they look at these grades, whether that the state assesses to individual public schools, and whether they're fair or not. They don't always paint the best picture. They're also concerned about infrastructure. It's another thing, that infrastructure all over the schools. We don't, and I really do think that in the short term we should use our ability to sort of bring everyone together, and, force some sort of mediated settlement. But long term, I mean, should city council be more involved in the administration of Cincinnati public schools? My gut says yes. We're held to account for it, whether we are or not. And there's nothing worse than when a constituent calls you and complains with a valid complaint, and your answer is, "I'm sorry, that's really not my department." The Cincinnati public schools, are a huge, they're a huge employer, they're a huge economic force. and obviously they're educating the children. And, I could foresee a time as we move forward where we, exercise more influence there. Because I just, and this sort of the icing on the cake as far as I'm concerned.
I think, I would love to, I'm a partner with Cincinnati Public Schools. I work within one of their schools. And, I would love to see more assistance, coming from the city. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but, when CPS is having, concerns, like we have X, Y, and Z problems right now that we're trying to address, bringing that to the city and seeing like, okay, what can council possibly do or offer in this situation? But, if I'm hearing you correctly, what the city could do at this time with regards to the sort of Metro CPS situation was kind of act like it as almost a bridge for that communication. Like, hey, bring all parties to the table within City Hall to have this open, publicly accessible discussion about what's going on. And that was my concern. I've talked to a couple of people who are, have been a little bit down on me for not being as, vocal or expressive about the situation as other candidates have been. And part of that is because, I think that it's important to apply pressure when accountability is needed and when the ball is dropped, or in this situation, like the bowling ball is dropped and it leaves a lot of damage. However, I really agree that at this present time, there's not much that can be done. Unfortunately, it seems like everyone's hands are tied in this situation. So, adding fuel to the fire is, maybe not necessarily going to help. What I can do, and what I have been doing behind the scenes, is working with families to help them figure out other avenues of transportation, helping them figure out, okay, here's the buses that your student is going to take, or some families who have needed to completely shift gears and change their students' high school, helping them in that process and figuring out those things and helping them come to those informed decisions on their own. So that is to say, even if a candidate is not, publicly vocal or outraged about an issue, doesn't necessarily mean that they're not helping resolve it in a smaller capacity. So while we're on the subject of transportation and transit and all of that good stuff, Rob, is this something that you have, thoughts on, or things that you would like to see our city change or improve in that regard?
Absolutely. Transit is one of them, and an infrastructure and opportunities so to have options. I think it's unacceptable. Had the opportunity, and I was raised in a Cincinnati public school where I had to take 2 buses. And so imagine those students and parents, if they're playing sports or have extracurricular activities. We all have seen it. Traffic is backed up. It's frustrating. Parents are have the obligation to leave work early in order to pick their child up, which is causing other issues they may have. And then you see escalations in terms of major problems when they're meeting up at these particular times instead of going directly home or to their routes. For example, I know a student that stays late. Now they rode the bus and then had a direct route. But they're taking 2 buses to get home. And in between that time, they're doing other activities that they're getting caught up in and they're involved in, and that leads to other trouble. Second, I just wanted to expand on other options. Now there's Peterman, there's the likes of Peterman in terms of our budget. I know our budget is tight and we have to make some type of cuts, but there's other options to work out, and maybe have a list of those high priority areas where we can maybe keep a certain route or two go in that particular route to cut down on that, not only that traffic, that wait time, and help out those needs of those families and those individuals that can get home and safe. The second part of that is just going back to the drawing board instead of studying it completely. I would like to be at the meeting at the table. Steve, he's fortunate enough to have insight on that. But I look at some of the issues that I'm hearing externally, and I like to have a solution to those problems. And those some of the solutions that I thought of: yellow bus services, maybe having less routes or less service bus. I don't know if that's an option at hand, but entertaining those in a sense where you narrow it down where it's helpful to those families. And then additional partners. You have small business owners that have bus services or somehow that we can benefit where it's a win-win, and having our options where where other routes and taking care of those individuals that live afar where they are benefiting from the transit services. Those are some ideas that I wrote down, and then those are easy fix in terms of having the solutions or alternatives to those problems.
All right, thank you for sharing. One question that I would love to, explore with both of you, and, whoever wants to chime in first is fine by me. How do we feel about bus lanes and bike lanes here in Cincinnati? Do we think that those are feasible, beneficial, not feasible, not beneficial? What are your thoughts and takes on that, just out of curiosity?
I can jump
I'll jump in if you don't. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rob.
in.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Thanks, Steve. Infrastructure and bike lanes are so important. I think we have a bike lane that's great when we look at the Hyde Park area. We're looking at the infrastructure of creating a bike lane downtown. But then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you do have safety. You do have buses that's turning. You have the streetcar situation that you have to be mindful of as well. But also look at larger cities and successful cities that have major infrastructure or great transit service. They find a way to do both, and it's more convenient. It's more approachable, and it leads us to have the freedom to go in a free spirit way and travel to our destination in a safe and in a sound way. I'm not opposing the cuts, but we have to find a way in the city of Cincinnati to grow. Not only safe, clean, and sound, but we want to grow our city in a way that is beneficial. I think we're a little bit behind the times in terms of our infrastructure and in terms of our transit service. We have a streetcar bus that goes within maybe 3 miles within downtown only. It would be nice if we can expand that, or we initially started off in terms of spending our taxpayer dollars on a transit system that's going in a 3 mile radius. That's just an example of one. It expanded, it helps, but we can do a lot more. And I compare those other cities that's successful because I want Cincinnati to be the best as well. I want us to be able to compete. I want people to come to Cincinnati. I want people to remain, and we have the retention of our current livable people that's in the city of Cincinnati as well.
I appreciate it. Steve, how about you?
Oh, look, the bike situation. I live on Clifton Avenue, and excuse me, most controversial, bike lane projects has been, we have a bike lane that was constructed back in March. It got a lot of use. Are now UC is essentially complaining it conflicts with their construction, and the city's and they're taking the position that if we're to make it a permanent bike lane, that's $3 million. And I can tell you, we don't have an extra $3 million sitting in the budget at the end of our fiscal, which is where we are right now. So to me, we need to have like a systemic approach on bike lanes. We have some wonderful ones that are primarily located on the east of town and our neighborhoods, and whole vision crown bike. connect. So Cummins, not that great idea. Just we the for too long been an after neighborhood sort of project, and I think we need to be more cognizant of that. In terms of the streetcar is forever. I mean, as a former board member, I think the street transit, play downtown, travel downtown, but it's using the streetcar to get to work. It just doesn't work for that. It's the loop's too small. The streetcar is a compromise. The original concept to run it all the way up to Clifton from basically Proctor all the way up to UC Hospital. It's just kind of where we are. And it doesn't work. For what it's but it's a cool to have downtown development, but it is not a good it. And it needs to either be extended or we just need to lessen our expectations for what it does.
That does make sense. I'm gonna put the spotlight on you with a question again. Why would it cost $3 million to make the bike lane permanent? Like, it's already there. Why would it cost so much to make it permanent? Is that for like the protections, or I myself and others may need help understanding where that $3 million price tag came from?
JC, you're from the administration, and I question. And right now, the lane is demarcated by plastic barricades. I said theory is that they would like concrete along that way. I don't know. That strikes me as extraordinarily expensive as well. And that's part of what I think we need to do. We need to have a more systemic, general discussion about what we expect from bike lanes. There's no way it would cost $3 million simply to paint that. I don't know what they have in mind. And maybe, but I do know that what would constitute a bike lane on a busy street such as Clifton Avenue is different than what would constitute a bike lane over on Wasson Way or other places where you don't have as much traffic. So I do know there's some distinction there, but $3 million certainly is an incredible tag as well. And once we take this up in a couple of weeks, we will be pushing back on that. That doesn't seem conceivable to me either.
Yeah, I would love to be in a council seat on that discussion, just to be like, hey, can you help me understand why it's going to cost this much money, and are there ways that we can cut that cost down without sacrificing like the infrastructure or the safety of this bike lane, and just kind of pressing into those questions. And I think that's just important for people to know, because I think it's pretty common for, or at least has been pretty common in the past for different projects to have certain price tags, and then we really don't end up knowing, okay, why does this cost so much? Where exactly is this money going to be spent on?
Well, and Stacey, God bless you for saying that, because that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about a lot of the folks who are running this year. And that is that, there's a lot to be said for having some subject matter around municipal finance and those sort of things that I have, but there's a lot more to be said for just having some general common sense and a willingness to ask questions. And a lot of the endorsed candidates on both sides are really end up afraid of offending people and asking the basic question, like, there's no way that bike lane should cost $3 million. Where in the hell they got that, I don't know. And those are the kinds of questions I ask and at council, and it'll be great to have some other folks to join in. My third is that it's a like sort of a bureaucratic mess and time. I'm sure $3 million studies and other things that probably aren't necessary, and that probably are, in my view, kind of a waste of tax. So, you for being willing to ask questions, because that's a big part of what I really think we did down there.
No, that makes sense to me. And I think, this is probably a kind of shameless self plug here. But like, I'm a therapist. My job is to ask questions, but also to do so in a way that isn't, just, harping on or attacking someone's point or what they're trying to present. My job as a therapist is to ask questions, to collect information, because quite frankly, I usually don't know, even if it's an individual who's coming to see me and I know what their diagnosis entails. I have all this head knowledge about, their mental health disorder and the symptoms that are involved with it and things like that. My job is still to, come in almost completely clueless and have them educate me on what their experience is. And I think that is something that is helpful to bring to the table on a city council job. Someone who's willing to not have all the answers and instead to be able to say, hey, I don't understand this price tag, or I don't understand this proposal. Can you help me understand? Because chances are, I always say, if you don't understand something, the chances of you being the only person in the room, or in this case, the city of Cincinnati, that doesn't understand it, the odds are very low. So, just being bold enough to ask those questions in a way that is educational and helps people fully understand the situation, I think is really, really beneficial. Rob, did you raise a hand there?
I did.
Go right
I
on
just
ahead.
wanted to piggyback off of that. And maybe Steve can have this question. Thanks for bringing that up too, Stacy. That in a meeting, normally it's just information. So before anything has been voted on or you're making cuts, is there some experts or information material in terms of the dollar amount when you throw the number 3 million or we don't have the money? It seems like a major city like the city of Cincinnati will bring in the experts and they do all the calculate the data and bring that in front of the board so you all can make the decisions that's at hand. Especially a very important decision in terms of transit or opportunity. Is that the case in terms of bringing that information, or do you personally have to research before you go and make a vote?
No, I mean, Mr. Harris, you're putting your finger on a very important issue at City Hall, and it's one that doesn't get enough appreciation, I don't think. Certainly media reports, but it is something that I think a lot of like average citizens are starting to understand. And it really goes to the heart of the whole mayor, city manager form of government. So when you're on council, the way it's supposed to work is you have a question, and we're supposed to have an independent city manager, and in this case, her administration, who's supposed to supply you with the objective data on cost, on regulations, on let's just say a city councilman comes forward and says, look, I want to build a bike lane on a certain you file a motion and you ask for a report. Then the administration led by the city manager makes a recommendation to you. And they put a price tag, estimated price tag, and they tell you kind of what's going to happen. Right now in our environment, there's this sense, of pushing back against those numbers that the city manager provides. And there's a question as to whether or not, it's truly independent information. And that's like, that's part of the process here right now that isn't working, for some of us. We have a very, very smart and capable city manager, but it's, really it's supposed to be like a three-part, three independent branches: the mayor, the city manager, and the council. And the concern right now is that that the mayor and the city manager are working together on things, and then the council gets boxed out. And that's where you'll see me occasionally in the newspaper. You'll see me, on city cable, looking like a very grumpy old man and questioning everything. And that's the thing. It's like, look, the three, like I said, the 3 million, I don't know, I got a memo the other, on over Labor Day that said the bike lane is going to cost 3 million, close to $3 to replace. And, from common sense, I'm like, what is it going to be gold plated somewhere like on it? Like that doesn't make any sense. Just from someone who's like lived 51 years on planet Earth. It's not that, there's no way. And you think sometimes, that these numbers are being presented to you to discourage you from pursuing a certain course of action. And when you start to question that, the objectivity and independence of the numbers and the estimates, that's a poisonous thing. And that's a tough thing. That's part of what's going on there. And I'm kind of impressed and amazed how many voters are sort of clued into that general idea. But that's a part of the challenge that we're facing right now, is whether the information we're provided is objective and independent information.
Or even, because if you have those questions, and I guess the natural follow-up one would be, okay, is this information accurate then? And that's a really difficult thing to balance in that situation, because I could definitely see circumstances where just knowing how humans work, challenging information turning into, as you mentioned earlier, Steve, how do we challenge information or ask questions without then bringing up people's defenses? Because when that happens, the topic or the goal gets lost, and then, little gets resolved. That's why I've been so, like watching, the whole last election cycle, like even locally here in Ohio with the respective races that we had, but especially the presidential one, watching all these various debates and things like that. My husband and I would sit and watch them. And then at the end of it, we turn to each other and be like, we didn't learn a darn thing. Like watching this entire hour-long debate between these individuals, we didn't learn anything about their plans, their policies, because personal feelings and emotions got into the way, instead of just, being able to ask and respond to questions at face value. It's just what they are. This is a question, and I would like an answer.
Stacey, if I could take it even a step further, it's like, this is the same issue that's in our national politics too. And I try to shy away from talking about national politics because I think it's, divisive on the local level. I mean, these are nonpartisan jobs that we're holding here in the city. But I mean, objectively, there is no evidence that the 2020 presidential election was some sort of fixed thing. I mean, objectively, it was not. Yet we had a president, outgoing President Trump, who insisted that it was fixed. And a lot of people believed him. And it's like, again, it goes to the same thing that I'm kind of talking about here, which is the quality of the information that is presented. And once, and a lot of this information is put out now on social media where there really is no fact checking. And that is the unique little, snake pit in which public officials find themselves. And if you all are elected, you'll have to contend with this as well, which is, we used to have a shared set of facts. Like we would all agree that this cost X amount of dollars, or that the wall was 10 feet high, or whatever the example might be. And you'll find that now we're in this bizarre situation where, we're arguing about things that would have been just, assumed facts. Like, what does something cost? What is needed? And that is one of the things that you really, really have to have a strong kind of backbone when you're confronting it, and just say, like, no, look, I know what reality is. I know what my common sense tells me, and this is what we're going to do, and this is how it is. But it's not a problem unique to Cincinnati. I mean, it's a problem that goes all the way to the top of our politics, in my view.
I'd say it's a problem that goes all across probably humanity. But, just with how things like social media and how information is shared, how that has really spread like wildfire. And I keep coming back to that like phrase that came up in the last few years, where like alternate facts or whatever it was called, alternative facts, like that became a thing. And it's really hard. So, this is kind of going off of our original plan, but this does,
That's
you
good.
know, it does give me a question for the two of you is, you know, in your respective campaigns, but then, assuming that you're elected, because I like to speak things into existence. Um, how will you go about being approachable and truthful and really establishing that trust and rapport with the communities? How about Rob? Why don't you go first on this one?
I'll go first. I was just thinking about what Keith stated in terms of not only the politics on a local level, on a national level. I think integrity is and being who you are. It will show your background. It will have a telltale in terms of what you do in your work will speak for itself as long as you're consistent in doing those things. However, the politics does play a part in terms of a 9-member council, and then you have the city manager, and then you have a mayor in terms of getting things across. So your question is, how are you approaching? Well, getting to know each member and each member getting to know you and where you stand, being fair and right and upholding integrity, regardless, that should yield some type of respect. For whether you're whatever party affiliate, not partisan, whatever it may have, people respect that. Now, when the emotions come in and you're really emotional in terms of decision making, that's another problem. So the issues that we have at hand right now, and if we're speaking on $3 million, and it makes sense to go ahead and do additional research and maybe go with another source, why can't we do that? If it makes sense to go ahead and do affordable housing and not just tax breaks for the developer and then displacing renters, like why can't we do that? If it's in black and white, where we need more police on the street and saying we don't have the resources to do that, but yet we find resources to beautify the city of Cincinnati and we do artwork, where's our priorities lie? So if you can get along, if you can really address the issues at hand, then in a way where you can leverage that and it makes sense. I think that's one, you're honorable, you're respectful, you uphold integrity, and then your colleagues have to respect that. And then coming with quality information and not just having that we have a problem. Yes, there's a lot of problems, but having a realistic solution and something that, maybe a plan B and a plan C if plan A originally doesn't work.
I agree. Councilman Gooden, how do you plan to be approachable, honest, fair, and, just to let the constituents know that, hey, I'm here for you. And yeah, how would you approach that?
Well, I think the rules have changed, over the last, 5 to 10 years or so. And, I'll just tell you what I do now and what I would continue to do if reelected, which is, I personally answer all my emails. I probably get about 20 to 30 constituent emails every day to my official account. I actually manage, with a few exceptions, manage my own Twitter account where I actually respond to folks there. I think people are sort of amused that that's really me on the other end. I don't know any other way to do it than through Facebook and other social media. I still don't understand my own Instagram account very well because I'm old. But I think those are great ways to reach out to voters. And I've learned a lot of stuff, on the social media accounts. There's folks who raise issues that I hadn't thought of. And it's almost sort of like crowdsourcing ideas sometimes. You really do get a little bit of a sense about what certain folks think. I also, I schedule, probably at least 10 hours a week for just constituent meetings and phone calls. In the last week or so, I've met with everyone from the head of the crossing guards group who needs more money to, you know, a daycare center, that's looking for funding. I mean, I try to choose as many kind of diverse, things as I can so that I have a little bit of a better idea about what's going on in the city. And it kind of goes back to what we talked about before. I learned very early on that I can't just rely upon the administration to provide me all the information I need. I got to go out and find my own information, whether it be through emails, whether it be through Twitter, whether it be through Facebook, whether it be through in-person meetings. I just, I got to get my own stuff. That's just kind of how I'm wired. And I would recommend that to both of you if you get on council. It's time consuming, but it's absolutely worth it. And I go to a lot of stuff. I go to a lot of meetings. I go to community council meetings. I meet with the CDC folks as often as I can. And I often go to the meetings. I love going to community council meetings. I make a point of going late because if you go early, they're like, oh, there's some council member here. I go sit in the back and late. You usually actually hear an honest discussion. I've sat in them where people are trashing me, and I'm like, well, like this is as honest as it gets, But that's good. You hear it and you understand what's actually happening. And it's just look, it's a new era. Even Cincinnati is a top 25 US city. We're a big deal, and increasingly a big deal in terms of our economic output. But we're still small enough that you should know the community council folks by name. You should know the major players here by name. You should be reaching out to these folks and really, it's just basic respect, and that's what we should be doing in my view. And social media, I'm not a big fan of social media on a personal level, but in terms of as a council person, it does allow you to really have a lot of contact with a lot of folks and quickly, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think, one of the things that I've kind of seen unfold just on that subject is, I think a lot of folks, especially for you, Councilman Gooden, or specifically you, is, hearing about you and, having kind of preconceived notions about what you're about. But I think for a lot of people, you've been able to turn those around just by engaging with them on social media and actually instead of getting defensive and just arguing points and just trying to be right, be like, well, hold on, let me clarify some things for you and let me engage with you. Douglas Walton is, he's in the chat being like, yep, me. You've I think you've demonstrated that very, very well. And I think that that's extremely, extremely important as far as the role goes. I think that every council member, to the best of their ability, needs to demonstrate care and concern. I wrestle with this a little bit because I see folks going out right now and talking to voters, and I get that. We're in a race. We are trying to get votes from people who vote. However, that just using that language ostracizes an entire population of people who aren't voting right now, whether these are, youth, teenagers in our city who, are up and coming, but still very much need to be heard and represented. I was educating someone just the other day that Jehovah's Witnesses don't vote because of their religious beliefs. However, they still live in our city and we still have an obligation to take care of them. So I think that you demonstrate that by showing how you interact and care for everyone, not just the people who agree with you, not just the people who support you in your campaigns and what you stand for, but everyone. So, kind of my philosophy, even in working in fast food and retail, back in the day, if I had angry customers who were coming in with sometimes legitimate complaints and they were, angry and calling me every name in the book, I am able to set that aside and figure out, okay, let's figure out the problem and let's resolve it together. in a way that lets you know that, like, even if you're sitting here calling me every name in the book, like, I can reject what you're doing but still care about you as an individual and make sure that this situation is resolved amicably. And I want to clarify for people that does not mean being a doormat either. That does not mean letting people walk all over you. There is an extent to where you're able to be like, hey, we're going to figure this out. However, not until you stop calling me these names. So, like, let's cool it and calm down first. Then let's cross that bridge together. Let me know when we can do that. I'm here to help. And there'd be numerous occasions where I'd be handling an angry customer or, what have you. And at the end of the day, or at the end of the conversation, they would be apologizing to me, which I think is good in a leadership position, because the reason that they apologize is because they recognize, like, wait, okay, this person, cared for me and they were concerned for me and they didn't deserve, kind of the way that I was treating them. And so, through that, I want people to know that even if you are a constituent who comes into my office or, comes and speaks with me, and you completely disagree with something that I'm doing and you just want to make that heard, I'm going to hear you and I'm going to care about you as an individual just the same. I just think that that's incredibly, incredibly important and something that we really need to see in our leadership, especially in divisive times as today. We don't need to be adding to the fire that is just mindless nonsense of social media fights and debating and arguing back and forth. We need to be different, and I think that's where the true fruitfulness and change happens, is when you can get past the arguing and get past the just trying to prove your point and prove yourself right, and just care about the person, hear their perspective, offer yours, and then what if that is all the ground that is covered that day, then so be it. At least ground wasn't lost by, okay, now this person has blocked me on Twitter, or now I'm just angry at this person and I don't want to speak to them. It's just I don't find it to be helpful, but it's hard because it's everywhere on social media. Rob, what did you want to say to that?
Yeah, I you hit the nail on the head in terms of the voters. There's a large audience of individuals that are not registered, and then there's a large audience of individuals that are not voting. However, that's the opportunity to win them over. And I noticed that just doing my surveys and just being out and about in the community and speaking, that, justice and inequalities, they've been beaten up, or they feel a particular way in terms of justice being served. When we talk about affordable housing, their living conditions and slum lords that's not being accountable in terms of what they have done and experienced. You can't talk about affordable housing without talking about low income housing, because there's a difference there, and people are living in a particular way where they feel they don't have a voice and they're forced to live in those areas. So these are all very important when we're going out to get people registered to vote. So what and I just had an event this past weekend that's fresh on my mind with a grassroots organization I'm a part of, One Family, One Love, and we had a mental illness and trauma. I wish I would have known you were involved. Your involvement would have probably brought you in on to be added on the panel. But we spoke about a lot of these different things, and some people saying to me they're not voting for what, it's not going to change. And then the things that I've experienced, you cannot change. These are the thought process where I'm an optimist. And I feel even it's more important for me to work hard to be on council so I could be a voice of the voiceless, and be that voice that sit at the table and preach those concerns that we have and those issues at hand. But and going back to the mental illness and the awareness that's going on is very important. It's so important that we address these issues for the betterment of our community as a whole, And what that does and what that looks like at an end result is a cleaner, safer, and vibrant and more livable. Um, I just wanted to add that. Thanks for bringing that up. And that's something that I feel that's important, that I'm tied to, and that I could sort of drive with those individuals that doesn't have a voice. And that's one reason why I'm running this race.
I will, selfishly selfishly and not, extend this invitation to the both of you, because like my philosophy this whole campaign has been, the getting on city council is not the end. It's a means to the end. And my end is, really focusing on expanding mental health care access and getting some of these better resources and more progressive resources in place here in Cincinnati. And I acknowledge that, realistically speaking, I may not get elected this go round. That's fine. I want change to happen. So, as we get closer to the election and beyond the election, I want to sit down with individuals who, have just the same amount of, the same chances that I do to get elected, and to sit down and talk with them and share the ideas that I'm platforming on, because at the end of the day, I don't care who accomplishes it. I just want it to be accomplished. So like Rob, if you would like to sit down and talk sometime about some of those ideas, Steve, you as well. And if either of you are elected to council and I'm not, then, but you have ideas or you really want to, focus on the mental health care piece, please use me as a resource. That is what I'm here for and what I'm happy to do. But to kind of close out our evening, I'd love to give you each another opportunity to just kind of summarize, whatever it is that you want to, that maybe you didn't get to say earlier, and to also share, your website and the events that you have coming up, things like that, and what people can do to help if they want to support you in your initiatives. So Councilman Gooden, why don't you start our end?
The beginning of the end.
Exactly.
Yes, we've been there before. Well, again, Stacy, thank you for putting this together, and Mr. Harris, good to hear from you too. And I think both of you would do a great job there. I mean, because it's like I say, it's very simple. The biggest qualification is that you need to have a backbone and be able to speak your mind. And I think it sounds like both of you have that, in abundance. So, it would be good to work with you all there. In terms of, in terms of summing up, all I can really say is that, the big lesson of this campaign to me and any other campaign really has been that you really have to appreciate the common humanity of everybody you encounter, whether you agree with them or not, and understand that everyone's on some sort of journey, whether they appreciate that journey or not. And that's one of the reasons, I've told folks, who've reached out to me about police reform, and I'm like, look, I'm all for certain police reforms that are sensible, but let's stop calling police officers names. Like, they're human beings too, who are going through, their own journeys here, and maybe they made mistakes or what have you, but they're human beings. And likewise, when I encounter some of my really, conservative, friends who want to like sort of caricature, progressives in a certain way, and I'm like, no, actually, these folks have been through their own life experiences that have given them this perspective. So perhaps you should appreciate that and appreciate their common humanity. So I guess, where I am, I get, one of my friends owns this bar and restaurant downtown, and their slogan is "All are welcome except those who don't welcome all." And that's just kind of where kind of I've ended up. If you're not open to talking to other folks and appreciating their perspective, no matter how different it might be, then you're really not our kind of folks. And that's really, I think, kind of the Cincinnati, mindset right now. And I think it's pretty healthy. And I think we're heading toward a very healthy thing, healthy election. And I think it's, I'm really impressed by how plugged in the voters are that I'm meeting with, and how thoughtful they are, and how they're looking beyond endorsements and party, and they're really trying to, they're trying to do something smart here, I think. So I think this is really going to be a good election, and I think there's going to be a lot of surprises. I think our friends at the newspaper here don't really have their finger on the pulse. I don't think they totally understand what's going to happen. I think there's going to be some real surprises at the end of the day, and I'm looking forward to those. And I think there's going to be some grassroots candidates get through, and I think that's great for the city. So keep going. In terms of events, I've got a lot of events that are coming up. I won't list them all here. You'll find them at Doug Walton's Twitter feed. I'm going to put them all there. I want to check Doug Walton with everything I'm doing. I've got some events coming up in College Hill. We've got some events coming up in Hyde Park and an event coming up in Bryce Hill around the Elder game. So there's going to be a bunch of stuff, but I won't take up all your time with that. But again, thank you for putting these together. I've gotten great feedback on these, and just thank you for what you're doing and keep running hard.
Absolutely. And these discussions have been so much fun. And, part of it is because of, candidates like yourself joining. And, Rob was very forthcoming. Rob's campaign reached out to me like, hey, can he get on one of these? So I really appreciate that and that willingness. So that said, Rob, I'll turn it over to you and you can share kind of your parting thoughts and ways people can help support you.
Absolutely. I would like to thank you as well, Stacey, for the opportunity to come on. And Steve, thank you for the work that you're currently doing, and thank you for the insight that you just added tonight. You can reach me at robharrisforcouncil.com, robharrisforcouncil.com on my website. I'm on all the social media channels as well, Rob Harris for Council on Facebook, and then Instagram as well. One thing, even in closing, when I always think about purpose in life, so waking up the next day and having something to look forward to. I think it was just graduating from college, and then one of the things that I've constantly do. Then last year, thinking that professionally in banking, moving up the ladder, which is all important, and then those are goals as I achieve them. But what was more consistent for me is just being involved in a community, fighting against injustice and inequality, and being a voice for the people. I learned that year after year, and it progressed. Really no desire to be in politics originally over those years, but I was learning more about myself, getting off of work, maybe working 10, 12 hours, and then going back in the community to get back in the community for another 3 or 4 hours, because that was my love. That was something that I enjoyed doing. And so when I think about doing things that I do, regardless of pay, regardless of salary, but what's near and dear to my heart and what's important, that's what I'm doing right now. So just to echo those thoughts and concerns that you mentioned earlier, that we have to go out regardless of the outcome. We all have a platform right now, and I'm walking in that platform, and I will continue to do those things and be a resource to those that need me. And along those ways, hopefully I can join and continue to be resources for others. So, that's what I'll say. And then at the end of the day, we need to listen more to the people, because the people will lead us. The concerns in every community is out there. A lot of these issues are nothing new. From opioid crisis to affordable housing, the killings that's on the street. You just need to be connected with people that can make change. And I'm truly, my slogan is among the people, for the people. So I stay among the people, but for the people. So thank you.
And quite frankly, to know what the people need and are requesting and hoping for, you have to be among them. So I definitely appreciate that. If you'd like to know more about me and my campaign, I'm on Twitter and Facebook at Stacey Smith CCC, and Stacey is with an E. And my website is staceysmithccc.wordpress.com. You can find my contact information on there as well. I'm a campaign of one, so you can get, if you reach out to me, you can guarantee that it's me that you're speaking to. But yeah, I really appreciate everyone's time tonight. I know we're in the middle of the week, and at the holiday, I feel like that usually makes the week a little weird for folks. So I appreciate the willingness regardless. And I'm excited. I think that we do have a really good group of candidates. We have a lot of individuals who are empathetic, really passionate and really caring about folks. And I hope that some of that gets through. I think that we're still going to have some instances where, money wins the seats, unfortunately. But I think that there will still be some seats won by just integrity, hard work, and true grassroots efforts. And I'm excited to see that happen. But yeah, we will officially close out the evening. This will be available on YouTube. So candidates, you are welcome to rip it off of YouTube. However, I don't actually know how to do that anymore, but you can, slice it and dice it however you want. Use this, share it however much you want. This is your video as much as it is mine. But I appreciate you both and for everyone watching. And until next month, stay safe and stay healthy, and yeah, go out and do some good for our city. Have a great night, gentlemen.
Stacy, thank you for doing this.
Always
Have
a pleasure.
Evening.
Always
God
a
bless
pleasure.
Doug Walton. Thank you. Good night.
Yes.
Thank you, Stacey.
Take care.
Thank you.